The sun blazed mercilessly over the dusty plains of Texas in the summer of 1887. Samuel Harrison wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he surveyed his failing ranch. Once proud cattle grazed on withered grass, their ribs showing through patchy coats. The drought had lasted 8 months, and his water wells were running dangerously low. Samuel's hands trembled as he counted the meager coins in his leather pouch for the third time that morning. $17.34. That was all that remained of his life's work. His wife Martha had died of fever the previous winter, leaving him alone to manage the sprawling ranch that had been in his family for 2 generations. The weathered rancher sat on his porch, staring at the letter in his hands. The bank wanted payment on his loan by month's end, or they would seize the property. $3,000. It might as well have been $3 million for all the chance he had of raising such a sum. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, growing larger as it approached his property. Samuel squinted against the glare, making out the familiar shape of a covered wagon. As it drew closer, he recognized the stern face of Ezra Blackwood, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the territory. Blackwood was known as a trader in human souls, though he operated within the twisted bounds of the law. He dealt in indentured servants, people who had fallen into debt and had no choice but to work for years to pay off what they owed. The practice disgusted Samuel, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The wagon creaked to a halt in front of the ranch house. Blackwood climbed down, his black suit somehow pristine despite the dusty journey. Behind him in the wagon, Samuel glimpsed 3 figures huddled under a canvas covering. "Samuel Harrison," Blackwood said, tipping his hat. "I heard about your troubles. Thought you might be interested in a business proposition." Samuel's jaw tightened. "What kind of proposition?" "Labor, my friend. Good, honest labor." Blackwood gestured toward his wagon. "I have 3 women here, all of them fallen on hard times. They owe substantial debts and need work to pay them off. You need help running this place. I can't afford hired hands, Ezra. You know that." Blackwood smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Not hired hands, indentured servants. You pay me their debt, and they work for you until it's paid off through their labor. 7 years each, all 3 for the sum of $3,000. Samuel felt his blood run cold. $3,000. Exactly what he owed the bank. "That's not a coincidence, is it? Nothing in this world happens by accident, Samuel. I make it my business to know who needs what." Blackwood's eyes glittered with shrewd calculation. "These women have nowhere else to go. You have work that needs doing. It's a solution that benefits everyone. Let me see them," Samuel said reluctantly. Blackwood pulled back the canvas, revealing 3 women of varying ages. The first was young, perhaps 20, with auburn hair and defiant green eyes despite her obvious exhaustion. The second appeared to be in her 30s, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work. The third was older, maybe 50, with graying hair and a resigned expression. "The young one is Catherine Walsh," Blackwood explained, "orphaned when her parents died of cholera. Accumulated debt trying to pay for their medicine and burial. The middle one is Rose Martinez, widow with children. Lost her home when her husband died in a mining accident. The older woman is Eleanor Pritchard, a teacher who guaranteed a loan for her brother. He disappeared, leaving her responsible for his debts." Samuel looked into their faces and saw his own desperation reflected back. These weren't criminals or lazy people looking for easy work. They were victims of circumstance, just like him. 7 years, he said quietly. 7 years each, Blackwood confirmed. "They'll work in exchange for room, board, and a small allowance. At the end of their terms, they'll be free to go wherever they choose." Catherine spoke up suddenly, her voice hoarse but determined. "We're not livestock to be bought and sold." "No, miss," Samuel replied, surprised by his own gentleness. "You're people who deserve better than the hand life dealt you. Same as me." Rose spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. "My children. Where are my children?" "Safe with the sisters at the mission in San Antonio," Blackwood answered. "Part of the arrangement is that they'll be cared for while you work off your debt." Eleanor remained silent, but Samuel could see the intelligence in her eyes as she assessed the situation. She was calculating odds, weighing options, and probably reaching the same conclusion he had. There weren't any other choices. Samuel walked away from the wagon, his mind racing. 7 years of labor from 3 people might be enough to not only save the ranch but make it profitable again. The young one looked strong despite her current condition. The widow clearly knew how to work hard. The teacher might be older, but educated help was valuable on any frontier ranch. But the moral weight of it sat heavy on his shoulders. He would essentially be buying human beings, even if the law called it something else. His father would have horsewhipped him for even considering such a thing, but his father had never faced losing everything with winter approaching. "The banknote is due in 3 weeks, Samuel said when he returned to Blackwood. "I know. Funny how these deadlines have a way of working out." Blackwood pulled out a contract from his jacket. "Everything's legal and proper. You pay the debts. They work for 7 years. Everyone gets what they need." Samuel took the contract, his hand shaking slightly as he read through the terms. Room and board for 3 women. A small allowance for personal needs. Basic medical care. No abuse or mistreatment. The women could request transfer to another employer if conditions were unacceptable, though few would likely take them given their debt status. "I need time to think," Samuel said. "Time's not a luxury any of us have," Blackwood replied. "I have other buyers interested. Miners up north always need domestic help. Factory owners back east are always looking for seamstresses. But I thought you might appreciate having people who could help you save this place rather than just looking for cheap labor." Samuel looked at his ranch again. The sagging fence posts, the empty cattle pens, the house that needed repairs he couldn't afford. Then he looked at the 3 women in the wagon. Catherine was watching him intently, as if trying to read his character. Rose was staring towards San Antonio, where her children waited. Eleanor was looking at the ranch with what appeared to be professional assessment. "If I do this," Samuel said slowly, "I want it understood that these women will be treated with respect. They'll work hard, but they won't be abused or mistreated. They'll have adequate food, clean quarters, and medical care when needed." "Of course," Blackwood agreed readily. "Damaged goods are worthless goods." The casual way he referred to the women as goods made Samuel's stomach turn, but he forced himself to think practically. If he didn't take them, someone else would. Someone who might not care about their welfare at all. And at the end of 7 years, they're free to go. No extensions, no additional charges, no attempts to keep them longer. That's the law, Samuel. I'm a businessman, not a slaver. Samuel wanted to point out that the distinction seemed awfully thin, but he held his tongue. He walked to the wagon and looked at each woman in turn. "If you come to work on my ranch," he said, "I'll treat you fair. The work will be hard, but no harder than necessary. You'll have clean beds, decent food, and respect. I can't promise more than that, but I won't give less." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "And if we refuse?" Blackwood answered before Samuel could speak. "Then you'll work for someone else. The debts remain either way." Samuel saw the defeat in their faces and felt another stab of guilt. But defeat was something he understood all too well these days. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Samuel thought of Martha and what she would say. She'd always been the moral compass in their marriage, the one who pushed him to do the right thing even when it was difficult. But she was gone, and he was facing a choice between survival and principle. "I'll give you my answer in the morning," Samuel finally said. Blackwood nodded. "We'll camp by your creek tonight. But remember, Samuel, sometimes the only choice is between bad and worse. At least with you, these women have a chance at decent treatment." As the wagon rolled toward the creek, Samuel remained on his porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, and the sound seemed to echo the loneliness that had consumed his life since Martha's death. He knew what choice he would make. The ranch was all he had left of his family's legacy. Without it, he would be just another broken man drifting from town to town, looking for work and finding only charity. With it, he could rebuild, create something worthwhile again. But the cost would be 3 women's freedom, even if only temporarily. The thought would haunt him, but the alternative was losing everything and helping no one. Samuel Harrison went to bed that night knowing that morning would bring a decision that would change 4 lives forever. In the darkness of his empty house, he whispered a prayer to Martha's memory, asking for forgiveness for what he was about to do. Dawn broke grey and cold over the Texas plains. Samuel Harrison stood at his kitchen window, watching smoke rise from the small campfire by the creek. He had spent the night tossing and turning, but his decision had been made before his head hit the pillow. At 7 o'clock sharp, he walked down to where Blackwood was preparing coffee over the dying embers. The 3 women sat nearby, their faces reflecting the uncertainty of their situation. They'd been given thin blankets but little else for comfort during the cold night. "I'll take them," Samuel said without preamble. "All three." Blackwood smiled and extended his hand. "Smart man. You won't regret this decision." But Samuel didn't take the offered handshake. Instead, he addressed the women directly. "I know this isn't what any of you wanted. It's not what I wanted either. But we all need to survive, and maybe we can help each other do that." Catherine looked up at him with those defiant green eyes. "What exactly do you expect from us?" "Honest work. The ranch needs everything: cooking, cleaning, mending, helping with the animals. There's a vegetable garden that needs tending and preserving food for winter. The house needs repairs I can't afford to hire done." Samuel paused, trying to find the right words. "I'm not looking for servants. I'm looking for partners in keeping this place alive." Rose spoke quietly. "You said we'd be treated fair. What does that mean exactly?" "It means you'll work from sunup to sundown, same as me. But you'll have decent meals, clean beds, and safety. No one will lay a hand on you in anger, and no one will take advantage of you in any way." Samuel's voice hardened slightly. "That's a promise, and I keep my word." Eleanor finally spoke, her educated voice clear despite her exhausted state. "And our living arrangements? There's a bunkhouse behind the main house that the previous hired hands used. It needs some work, but it's solid. 3 beds, a stove for heat, and privacy." Samuel looked at each of them. "You'll have your own space, and I'll respect it." Blackwood pulled out the contract and a leather pouch heavy with coins. $3,000 as agreed. "Sign here, Samuel." Samuel took the pen with steady hands and signed his name. The weight of what he was doing settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. But there was no turning back now. The money would save his ranch, and perhaps these women would find something better here than whatever fate awaited them elsewhere. "Ladies," Blackwood said, standing and brushing dust from his suit, "you now belong to Samuel Harrison for the next 7 years. Work hard, 'cause no trouble, and the time will pass quickly enough. We don't belong to anyone," Catherine said sharply. "Legally you do," Blackwood replied. "But Mr. Harrison seems like a decent enough master." "You could do much worse." After Blackwood had left in his wagon, Samuel found himself alone with 3 women who looked at him with varying degrees of mistrust and resignation. The sun was climbing higher, promising another scorching day. "Let me show you around," Samuel said awkwardly. "Help you get settled." The tour was brief but thorough. The main house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a kitchen, sitting room, 2 bedrooms, and a small office. The bunkhouse needed cleaning and some minor repairs, but it was livable. The barn held his remaining cattle and horses, along with chickens that provided eggs and occasionally meat. Catherine proved to have experience with animals, moving confidently among the cattle and earning grudging respect from Samuel's temperamental horse. Rose immediately began assessing the kitchen, noting what supplies were available and what was needed. Eleanor examined everything with the analytical mind of someone accustomed to solving problems. "The roof needs work before the rains come," Eleanor observed. "And those fence posts won't last another season." "I know," Samuel replied. "But repairs cost money I don't have." "Lumber doesn't always require money," she said thoughtfully. "There's a stand of good timber about 5 miles north. Hard work with an axe, but it would provide what we need." Samuel looked at her with new interest. "You know about construction?"
I taught in a one-room schoolhouse for 15 years.
When you're responsible for maintaining a building with minimal budget, you learn practical skills quickly. Eleanor gestured toward the sagging barn door. "Most of these problems can be solved with time and effort rather than cash." Over the following days, an unexpected routine developed. Samuel woke before dawn to tend the animals, while the women tackled various projects around the ranch. Catherine proved surprisingly capable with the cattle, seeming to have an instinctive understanding of how to move them and calm them. Rose transformed the chaotic kitchen into an organized workspace and began preparing meals that were simple but substantially better than Samuel's previous attempts at cooking. Eleanor appointed herself as the ranch's general contractor, identifying problems and developing solutions. She had Samuel teach her basic carpentry, and within a week she was making repairs that had been neglected for months. The work was hard, made harder by the continuing drought and the constant pressure of making the ranch profitable enough to sustain 4 people. But slowly, Samuel began to see improvements. The fence line grew stronger. The vegetable garden, under Rose's careful attention, began producing food despite the dry conditions. The house took on a cleaner, more organized appearance. Evenings were the most challenging time. The four of them would gather for dinner, eating Rose's cooking by lamplight, struggling to make conversation. The artificial nature of their relationship hung over everything like a cloud. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Catherine finally addressed the elephant in the room. "This is wrong, you know," she said suddenly during a particularly quiet meal. "People shouldn't own other people, no matter what fancy legal words you use to dress it up." Samuel set down his fork. "You're right. It is wrong. But what would you have me do? Let the bank take the ranch and leave all of us with nothing? There had to be other options. If there were, I couldn't find them." Samuel's voice was tired. "Believe me, I tried everything else first." Rose spoke up unexpectedly. "My children need me to survive this. If working here for 7 years means they have a chance at a better life, then I'll do whatever it takes. That's exactly the kind of thinking that allows this system to continue," Catherine argued. "They force us into impossible situations and then act like we chose to be here." Eleanor had remained silent during the exchange, but now she looked up from her meal. "The system is unjust, that's true, but we can choose how we respond to injustice. We can let it break us, or we can use it to build something better." "What do you mean?" Samuel asked. "I mean, we have 7 years to make this ranch successful. 7 years to prove that people working together can accomplish more than people working against each other." Eleanor looked around the table. "In 7 years, this place could be prosperous enough to support all of us, if we're smart about it." Catherine shook her head. "In 7 years, we'll be free to leave. Why would we want to stay?" "Because maybe if we do this right, we'll have built something worth staying for," Eleanor replied. The conversation continued late into the evening, touching on questions none of them had easy answers for. What did freedom really mean? Was it better to have security without choice, or choice without security? Could people forced into a situation create something genuine from it? As the weeks passed, these philosophical discussions became a regular feature of their evenings. Samuel found himself looking forward to them, despite their often uncomfortable nature. For the first time since Martha's death, he wasn't alone with his thoughts. The women began to show their individual strengths more clearly. Catherine's defiant streak made her fearless when dealing with difficult cattle or repairs that required courage. Rose's nurturing nature extended beyond cooking to caring for sick animals and maintaining the morale of the group during difficult days. Eleanor's intelligence and education proved invaluable in planning improvements and solving logistical problems. But it was the combination of their efforts that truly began to transform the ranch. Working together, they accomplished things that would have been impossible individually. They dug a new well, built an expanded chicken coop, and improved the irrigation system for the vegetable garden. Samuel found himself changing as well. The desperation and isolation that had consumed him began to lift. Having people to talk to share meals with, to plan with, reminded him of what it felt like to be part of something larger than his own survival. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rose mentioned that she had received a letter from the mission where her children were staying. "They're doing well," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Learning to read and write. The sisters say they ask about me every day." "How old are they?" Samuel asked. "Maria is 8, Carlos is 6, and little Anna just turned 4. Rose wiped away a tear. "Anna probably doesn't even remember me clearly by now." Catherine reached over and squeezed Rose's hand. 4 years is nothing to a child. She'll remember you. 7 years, though. Rose's voice trailed off. 7 years is a long time, Samuel admitted. But it's not forever, and maybe there are ways to make it shorter. Eleanor looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the contract specifies that the debt can be paid off early if sufficient funds become available." Samuel had been thinking about this for weeks. If the ranch becomes profitable enough, maybe we can find a way to reduce those 7 years. It was a dangerous thing to suggest, offering hope that might prove false. But Samuel had begun to realize that hope was necessary for all of them, even if it came with risks. That night, as Samuel lay in his bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into sleep, he thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. The place felt alive again, in a way it hadn't since Martha's death. There were voices in the kitchen in the morning, laughter occasionally drifting from the bunkhouse in the evening, and a sense of purpose that extended beyond mere survival. But he also knew that the fundamental injustice of their situation hadn't changed. 3 women were bound to his land by legal documents and economic desperation. No matter how well he treated them, no matter how much they accomplished together, that basic inequality remained. The question that haunted him was whether something good could grow from such an unjust foundation. Could genuine partnerships emerge from forced arrangements? Could people find freedom within the constraints of an unfree system? As autumn approached, bringing with it the hope of rain and the promise of harvest, Samuel Harrison found himself cautiously optimistic about the future for the first time in months. But he also knew that the real test of their arrangement was yet to come. The first heavy rains came in September, ending the drought that had nearly destroyed Samuel's ranch. The 4 of them stood on the porch, watching water pour from the sky like a benediction. Catherine actually laughed, the first time Samuel had heard such a sound from her, and Rose wept tears of relief. "The timing couldn't be better," Eleanor observed, ever practical. "We'll have a good harvest from the vegetable garden and the grass will recover before winter." The rains brought more than relief from the drought. They brought visitors. Word had spread throughout the territory about Samuel Harrison's unusual arrangement, and people were curious. Some came with genuine interest in how the ranch was developing. Others came with disapproval barely concealed behind polite conversation. The first significant visitor was Judge William Cortez, a man whose opinion carried considerable weight in the region. He arrived on a crisp October morning, riding a fine horse and dressed in expensive clothes that spoke of his position in society. "Samuel," the judge said, dismounting near the house, "I thought it was time I paid you a visit. See how you're managing these days." Samuel knew this wasn't a social call. Judge Cortez was known for his strict interpretation of proper social order, and the arrangement at the ranch likely troubled him. "Judge," Samuel replied carefully. "Welcome. Would you like some coffee?" "Rose makes excellent coffee." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly at the casual way Samuel referred to one of his indentured servants. "Yes, thank you. I'd like to meet these women I've been hearing so much about." The meeting was tense from the beginning. Judge Cortez questioned each woman about their treatment, their living conditions, and their satisfaction with the arrangement. His manner was formal and somewhat condescending, treating them more like property to be inspected than people to be consulted. Catherine predictably bristled at his attitude. "We're being treated fairly," she said, her voice edged with defiance. "Better than we expected, if you want the truth." "I see," the judge replied coolly. "And you understand your legal obligations? The consequences of attempting to leave before your contracts are fulfilled?" "We understand perfectly," Eleanor interjected, her educated voice matching his formality. "We also understand our rights under those same contracts." Judge Cortez spent the entire day at the ranch, observing their routines and asking pointed questions. Samuel could sense the man's disapproval growing, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was causing it. That evening, as the women prepared dinner, the judge sat with Samuel on the porch. "You're treating them too well," Cortez said without preamble. Samuel turned to look at him. "I'm sorry?" "These women are indentured servants, Samuel. They're not your partners or your employees. They're legally bound to serve you for 7 years. Treating them as equals sets a dangerous precedent." "Dangerous how?" "It gives other servants ideas. Makes them think they deserve better treatment than the law requires." The judge's voice was stern. "You're creating problems that will affect other property owners in the territory." Samuel felt anger rise in his chest. "They're human beings, Judge! They deserve to be treated with dignity. They're debtors working off their obligations. Nothing more, nothing less." Cortez stood up, straightening his coat. "I'm warning you, Samuel. If word spreads that indentured servants can live like free people, it will undermine the entire system. That's not good for anyone." After the judge left, the atmosphere at the ranch felt different. The women had overheard enough of the conversation to understand that their situation had attracted unwanted attention. "He wants you to treat us worse," Catherine said that evening at dinner. "He wants me to follow the letter of the law," Samuel replied. "But the law allows for decent treatment. I'm not breaking any rules by treating you fairly." "Maybe not," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "But we need to be careful. If powerful men decide we're a threat to their interests, they'll find ways to cause problems." Her words proved prophetic. Over the following weeks, Samuel noticed subtle changes in how he was treated in town. Merchants were less friendly, conversations stopped when he approached, and some people avoided him altogether. The situation came to a head in November, When Deputy Sheriff Tom Bradley visited the ranch, Bradley was a hard man with a reputation for strictness, and his presence always meant trouble. "Got some complaints about this place," Bradley announced, dismounting from his horse with deliberate slowness. "What kind of complaints?" Samuel asked. "Reports that you're not properly supervising your servants, that they're allowed to move around freely, make decisions without permission, that sort of thing." Bradley's hand rested casually on his gun belt. "Some folks think you're being too lenient." Samuel felt a chill run through him. "Everything I'm doing is legal under the terms of their contracts."
Maybe so, but the contracts also give you considerable authority over their daily lives.
"Authority you don't seem to be exercising." Bradley looked around the ranch with critical eyes. "I need to inspect the premises, talk to the women, make sure everything's proper." The inspection was thorough and humiliating. Bradley questioned each woman separately about their living conditions, work schedules, and treatment. He examined their quarters, checked their belongings, and made detailed notes about everything he observed. When he finished, Bradley called Samuel aside. "Legally, you're within your rights," he admitted grudgingly. "But I'm telling you the same thing Judge Cortez probably told you. You're making people nervous. That's not smart." "Are you threatening me, Deputy?" "I'm advising you. There are other ways to interpret these contracts, other authorities who might view your arrangement less favorably." Bradley mounted his horse. "Think carefully about whether you want to continue down this path." That night, the four of them held a long discussion about their options. The pressure from the community was real and growing. Samuel could see the worry in the women's faces as they contemplated what might happen if the authorities decided to intervene more aggressively. "They could transfer us to other employers," Rose said quietly, "people who wouldn't be as kind. Or they could find legal reasons to extend our contracts," Eleanor added. "There are precedents for that when servants are deemed problematic." Catherine was more direct. "They want to break up what we've built here because it threatens their system. If indentured servants can live with dignity, it makes their treatment of others look cruel by comparison." Samuel realized they had reached a crucial moment. They could continue as they were and risk escalating conflict with local authorities, or they could change their arrangement to satisfy social expectations. But there was a third option, one that had been growing in Samuel's mind for weeks. "What if we found a way to end the contracts early?" he said finally. The women looked at him with surprise and hope. "How?" Eleanor asked. "The contracts can be terminated if the debts are paid in full. If the ranch becomes profitable enough." Samuel paused, knowing he was making a promise he might not be able to keep. It would take time and a lot of work, but it's possible. Over the winter months, they threw themselves into making the ranch as profitable as possible. They expanded the cattle herd, improved their breeding program, and developed new income sources. Eleanor's education proved invaluable in keeping detailed records and planning for maximum efficiency. Rose's cooking skills led to a small business providing meals for travelers passing through the area. Catherine's way with animals helped them develop a reputation for well-trained horses that commanded premium prices. Samuel found himself working harder than he ever had in his life, but also feeling more alive. The combination of shared purpose and growing success was intoxicating. By spring, the ranch was showing real profits for the first time in years. But Samuel knew it would take at least 2 more years of continued success to accumulate enough money to buy out all 3 contracts. That's when an unexpected opportunity arose. A cattle buyer from Kansas visited the ranch and was so impressed with the quality of their stock that he offered to buy the entire herd at prices well above market rate. More importantly, he offered Samuel a contract to supply cattle regularly to buyers up north. The deal would provide enough immediate cash to pay off 2 of the 3 contracts, with the third following within a year if their success continued. Samuel called the women together that evening to discuss the offer. "I can buy Catherine and Eleanor's freedom immediately," he said. "Rose's would follow within 12 months if the Kansas deal works out as promised." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Why those 2 first?" Rose asked quietly. Samuel had thought carefully about this. "Catherine has made it clear that freedom is what she values most. Eleanor has skills that would let her succeed anywhere. You have children waiting for you, but you also have the most to gain from waiting until the ranch is fully established." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than 7 years of servitude for all of them. 2 weeks later, Samuel rode into town with Catherine and Eleanor to complete the legal paperwork. The process was surprisingly simple: payment of the outstanding debts, signatures on release documents, and suddenly, 2 women were free. Catherine chose to leave immediately, accepting Samuel's offer of a horse and enough money to travel to California where she had distant relatives. Her goodbye was brief but genuine. "Thank you," she said simply, "for treating us like people instead of property." Eleanor surprised everyone by choosing to stay. "I'm a teacher," she explained. "This territory needs schools, and you've shown me it's possible to build something good here. If you'll have me as a partner rather than a servant, I'd like to help you continue what we've started." Samuel agreed immediately, recognizing that Eleanor's contributions had been essential to their success. Rose's freedom came 8 months later, exactly as Samuel had promised, but like Eleanor, she chose to remain at the ranch, at least temporarily. "My children are settled at the mission school," she explained. "They can stay there until summer, and by then we'll know if this partnership is really going to work." By the summer of 1890, 3 years after Samuel had signed those contracts, the ranch was prosperous and growing. Rose's children had come to live with her, adding young voices and laughter to the daily routine. Eleanor had indeed started a small school, serving the scattered families in the area. Samuel often thought about that desperate day when he had faced losing everything. The choice to buy 3 women's labor contracts had saved his ranch, but it had also taught him something valuable about the difference between legal ownership and genuine partnership. The system that had brought the women to his ranch was unjust, designed to exploit desperation and maintain inequality. But within that unjust system, they had managed to create something better, a community based on mutual respect and shared success. Samuel Harrison had bought 3 women to save his ranch, but in the end, they had all saved each other. The ranch prospered not because of forced labor, but because free people working together could accomplish things that no amount of coercion ever could. On quiet evenings, sitting on the porch with Eleanor and Rose while their children played in the yard, Samuel sometimes wondered what his wife Martha would have thought of how things had turned out. He hoped she would have understood that sometimes survival requires making imperfect choices, but that those choices don't have to define who you become. The contracts that had once bound 3 women to his land were now just pieces of paper in his desk drawer, yellowed and forgotten. What bound them together now was something far stronger, the knowledge that they had built something good from desperate circumstances, and the shared commitment to never let desperation drive them to compromise their humanity again.